Your Majesty, you've done a wonderful job cutting your lawn. And she said, Colonel, that's my John Deere over there. I cut that little square for these two little darling dogs, two little corgis. And she said, Colonel, did you bring those Canada geese to poop on my lawn? I said, Your Majesty, I have the solution. You're going to love me. Fox 40. And she put it in her mouth and she said, Colonel, this is better than a shotgun. And she blew it.
And now, Episode 4, Letter D, Determination. Join hosts Dana Pappas and Nate Acosta with special guest Ron Foxcroft on this week's episode of the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas, back again with my co-host Nate Acosta. And this is a special week because we're during NFHS Fall Sports Officials Appreciation Week, which is one of my favorite weeks of the year, as we get the opportunity to thank officials from across the country for all of the work that they do in interscholastic athletics. So we're excited about that. And today we're really honored to have a guest with us who can be described as a founder, an innovator, a leader, and really one of the most fascinating human beings I've ever met. I'm especially excited tonight because our podcast is now going international with our first Canadian guest joining us.
On today's episode, we are covering the letter D, and we will be discussing determination as an official and how necessary it is that officials are driven and determined throughout their careers at every level. As we continue to educate, elevate, and excite through every podcast, we are certain that our guest will do all of that, as he certainly is a model of grit and determination.
And here's something that I can say about our guest. If you're an official and you have a whistle, you're connected to our guest. In fact, if you are in any job that uses a whistle, chances are you're probably connected to him. Look at it. He's got one in his hand.
This one's unique.
What is that one?
This has 24 and 8. That's the whistle we made for Kobe Bryant's family.
Oh,
after
that's amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. So Ron Foxcroft, he's a true pioneer in the officiating industry as the creator of the P-less whistle. And if you're an official and you still have a whistle with a P, throw that thing in the trash and get yourself a Fox 40. Ron is the founder and CEO of Fox 40 International. Fox 40 whistles are sold in 140 countries around the globe, and I personally do not know an official who doesn't use one of his whistles. Ron is also the CEO of Fluke Transportation, and we're honored to have him with us today on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Ron, it's great to have you on the show. So let's just dive right into the first question. Why is determination such a critical part of being a successful sports official?
Great question. I must say, Dana and I have worked together now for about 10 years, and she is a pistol. She is amazing, and she is the reason that I'm here tonight, because when Dana calls, it's like getting a phone call from the Queen. You return the call.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
You know, I'm really glad you asked me about that, because I experienced the need for determination after my very first basketball game, officiating basketball game at 17 years of age. I was a football quarterback, injured my back. Back then, because I'm an old guy, they didn't have the medical technology that they have today. So I couldn't play football anymore, and I was absolutely devastated. A friend of mine said, have you ever thought of refereeing basketball? And I said, no, I haven't, but I've umpired some baseball games, and why don't we give it a try? So he took me to the clinic, and I took the clinic. I'm still 17 years old, and in Canada, we did the clinic in September and October, and November, they threw you in starting to referee. So I met the clinician, and I learned right off the bat, you can't referee alone. You need mentors, and partners, and I learned a lesson. Surround yourself with smart people. Gives you some options. So I met this amazing clinician who became a mentor. And he said to me, he gave me 4 things, and I'm going to get to the determination factor. He said, work hundreds of games. That's how you get better. Keep your stuff in the trunk. I didn't understand that. Take no out of your vocabulary. He explained, because you may get an assignment where you're not the most qualified, but the most available. Interesting. And then he said, go to as many college games when you're not working and watch experienced referees referee and learn. And they were the 4 things he said to me before I got my first game. Well, now we're in November. I'm still 17 years old, and I'm going to be 18 on the 5th. And my first game is actually a triple header. CYO, triple header, 75 cents a game. And that was a pretty good deal because I came from a pretty good upbringing, but we didn't have a lot of money. Mom was a church organist. Dad was a foreman in a printing shop. We were comfortable, but the 75 cents was pretty good because 3 games is $2 and a quarter, and gas was 39 cents a gallon, and a Harvey's hamburger with fry and Coke was 50 cents. Now, I got it. Harvey's hamburgers, you don't have them in the United States. If you go to Canada, you got to have a Harvey's hamburger. They're the very, very best. So I did my first game, 3 games, and the guy came and paid me 75 cents a game. And he said, we want change. You're rotten.
Wow.
You should take up bowling as a hobby.
How rude.
So I left there, and I had 2 options: be devastated or be determined. I chose to be determined. And you gotta, as an official, you gotta be honest with yourself. I was rotten. I was really bad. And I didn't give the kids the opportunity that they deserved. So with having only 2 options, devastation and quit, or determination, I became determined. And I took no out of my vocabulary. I worked every single night for 75 cents a game in the CYO and improved and listened to my mentor. And he kept saying to me, take a couple of nights off and go and watch real referees work. So now I've been working all these CYO games, and I'll get to the bottom of the story. I go to my first college game to watch it, to watch good referees ref. And in Canada, the gymnasium held 3,000 people, and a lot of people make a lot of noise in a gym that holds 3,000 people. Dana, you can appreciate a gym with 3,000 people that holds 3,000 people is pretty loud.
It is.
So, 2-referee system back in those days. One of the refs got sick, and they're about to cancel the game with 3,000 people. So I ran down onto the floor. And I've been refereeing CYO since November, and now I've turned 18, and this is February. And I said to the 2 coaches, you don't have to cancel the game. I'm a licensed referee. And the coach said, where's your stuff? It's in the trunk.
Yep.
I love it.
I refereed the game. Determined that I was going to fake it. The two coaches then said to me before we started, and I'm with a really good referee, Lenny Parisi. Anyway, the two coaches said, "Kid, how old are you?" "I'm 24. "How long you been refereeing?" "A long time." So Lenny says, "Fox, you're 18. You've done nothing but CYO, but I love you. I'll tell you what, we're going to do well. You do the running, and I'll do the talking." And I did the game. I did the college game in front of 3,000 people. And the two coaches, even the losing coach, called the supervisor, who was my clinician, and said, "You know, that kid, the 24-year-old kid that's ref that game last night, you better hire him." They hired me. And in Canada, to referee Division I intercollegiate, it's called a panel. So I got hired to referee Division I in Canada. And it was great. 3 years later, I got the national championship game because the guy on the game, the previous game, pulled his hamstring. And so my mentor said, "Ron, you really didn't earn this, and you're really not qualified, but I ain't got anybody else. So will you work the game?" And I worked it with Len Parisi, the guy I did the first game with. And he said to me, "Listen, you do the running and I'll do the talking." Well, they played the national anthem and my legs were like spaghetti. I was so nervous, but it's the National Collegiate Championship. Got through the game, and a fan from the losing team came out of the stands through security to get me. And the athletic director of the university tackled him, stopped him from getting me. I got a police escort out of the arena, out of town, and decided at that moment officiating wasn't for me. And they didn't have cell phones in those days. That was a Saturday. And I made up my mind Sunday that I would phone the supervisor and say, "This is a great thing, a great opportunity, but I don't think it's for me." So I went to work on Monday morning, ready to make the phone call. And I got a phone call from a journalist. His name was Bob Gay. And he said, "I understand that you may want to quit," because I had run into him after the game. He said, "I need to teach you determination." He said, "You need the game, and the game needs you. And that's not determination by quitting." And
Amazing.
I decided to keep my schedule and keep refereeing. And it's funny, I kept refereeing, and my mentor, Kitch, the clinician, years later said to me, "I want you to do two things. I want you to join IAABO, IAABO. And if you're a basketball referee and you're not a member of IAABO, one rule, one interpretation, you better join tomorrow." He said, "You join IAABO because they have a monthly sportorial on mechanics and rules and training, and they're the best basketball training, teaching, rules organization in the world. So, Ron, I want you to join IBO, which I did, and I got inducted a few years ago in the IBO Hall of Fame. And he said, I want you to do another thing. I want you to apply for your FIBA license. I said, what's FIBA? He says, well, FIBA is the governing body that governs Olympic basketball. So I applied for my FIBA license, got it, did the World Championships in San Juan in 1974. And because I had a FIBA license and my stuff in the trunk, I got to work the Olympics in 1976. And you talk about determination. I walked into the Olympics in 1976, which was in Montreal. And of course, I got to meet Dean Smith and Phil Ford, all these great guys. But anyway, Lord Callanan said to me, once I walked in, he says, you know, Canadians can't play this game and you can't ref it. You're getting one game. I was determined to show him that Canadians can referee basketball. Because, you know what, I realized it wasn't the violent, slippery surface game, hockey, and everybody in Canada plays hockey and referees hockey, and I wasn't a hockey, I was a hockey player, but I wasn't a hockey refereeing that violent, slippery surface game. So I went out and I did the first game, and they're playing the national anthem, and I said, you know what, I'm going to referee like crazy because their expectations of me are zero. Got 2 games, got 3 games, got 4 games, got several games. And I'm in my hotel room. My roommate is Hank Nichols, Dr. Nichols, who did nothing but smoke and snore. 2 things happened in the Sheraton there in Montreal. First of all, I'm not sleeping because he's smoking and snoring. And some guy walks in, David Dodge.
Oh my gosh.
From this new magazine called Referee. And he said, I'm here to do a feature on Dr. Nichols. I said, well, when are you doing one on me?
Yeah.
He said, when you accomplish something. And an hour later, he's doing that article. There's a knock on the door. I go to the door because Dodge is interviewing Hank, and Hank's smoking. And I answer the door. It's 2 Mounties. And I thought, they're here to arrest me. Because the Mounties always get their man. They had an envelope, which was not for Hank. It was for me. I opened the envelope, and it said, you're refereeing the Olympic gold medal basketball game on ABC national TV the next night. So I was determined to tell Lord Callanan, the head of the Olympics, that Canadians can referee the violent, slippery surface game, but Canadians can also referee basketball.
That's it. So who was the championship game, the gold medal game?
Yeah, it was Dean Smith. There was a young coach that nobody had heard of, John Thompson. They were playing Yugoslavia, and Adrian Dantley and Phil Ford, amazing team. They beat Yugoslavia, and I got through the game. And that night, Dr. Stites came to me, and he said, Ron, you ever consider refereeing in the NCAA? Use me as a reference. And the same night, Dan Woldridge, famous referee from the ACC, came up to me, and he says, you know, Ron, you're not bad. And I know the guy that runs the Sun Belt Conference. His name's Jack Matten. And I'm going to call him, and I'm going to put your name forward. And I got a call from Jack Matton, who, by the way, was a great referee in the ACC and the agent for Herschel Walker.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And Jack called me, and he said, would you like to referee in the Sun Belt? And I thought, yeah, that would be great. And he said, well, I said, where do I apply? He says, you don't. You're hired. It was different then. No camps, no resumes. He said, I was the scorekeeper in Atlanta when you refereed Russia, USA. And he said, I know what you can do. So I started in the Sun Belt. My first game, I was rotten. And I struggled. I really struggled, Dana, because you see, everybody that comes into Division I starts in Division III, Division II, junior college, as do the coaches. So now you got this guy parachuting in, not known by anybody.
Some Canadian in the Sun Belt Conference.
And the coaches really didn't accept me. And then one day I'm working a game in Houston, and the guy walks in, my partner walks in, he says, I'm not refereeing with you because you're Canadian and you're taking a job away from my friend, an American. And I said, well, I guess I got to go out there and do the game by myself. So during the national anthem, there's like in the summit, 15,000 people. Both teams hate each other. We called 59 fouls. And he worked the game with me. He came out during the national anthem, 2-person game. And we got in the locker room. He hugged me. He said, you're not Ron the Canadian, you're Ron the ref. And back then, Nate, Dana, there were only 2 forms of communication. Telephone, teleref.
Still
still
a thing.
It's still a thing.
Kind of that way today.
Oh, for sure.
And, I started refereeing and working with smart people, realizing that if you work with smart people, it gives you more options. Got hired in 6 conferences and did it for 25 years.
That's amazing. So we kind of want to stay with that as you're talking about your journey and your determination to get where you are today. We know you had an amazing officiating career, Olympics, NCAA. Let's talk about inventing the whistle. Let's talk about Fox 40. Let's talk about fluke. So you had to have a great degree of determination to get into officiating and to continue in that career. But meanwhile, you have these whistles with this dang P in them, and
That never worked.
And
so,
to
go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, to create probably the best thing since sliced bread
for
for
sure.
officials.
For sure.
I mean, there's nothing like it. It is probably one of the biggest inventions known to man.
Absolutely. So I want to hear this story. I want to hear about the determination off the court to make this invention, and then also, dabble in a little transportation company and all of that stuff. So let's hear about your determination on that side of things, Ron.
Well, I meet people your age, Dana, and Nate, your age, and I say, wasn't it awful trying to referee with a P whistle? And people like Dana and Nate are so young, they turn to me and say, I never refereed with a P whistle.
No.
Are you in that category, Dana? Did you ever work with a P whistle?
So we had in elementary school PE, I remember very distinctly our coaches always had the P whistle, and I was always fascinated with them. So we would take his whistle from him, and I apologize to my elementary school PE coach right now. We would take his whistle, and we'd always try to figure out how to get the P out of it because we just thought it was the weirdest thing. So you'd have 10 elementary school kids playing around with this whistle trying to get the P out. So that's the only relationship I have with the P whistle.
And my only experience was same thing. Hey, you're going to referee some youth league games, first game ever, and they don't tell you what kind of whistle to get. You
No.
just you go to the local store that has a whistle, and they had this metal whistle with
Lousy.
with a P in it, and I
That
took
off.
it, and as
No.
soon as I stepped on the floor, my partner made sure to give me a Fox 40.
Yeah. Now we got the cushion ones.
Oh yeah.
So it reminds me of a story. You taking the P out of the whistle. I met Barry Mano refereeing in the Sun Belt. Imagine a guy from Wisconsin and a guy from Canada working in the Sun Belt with two Florida schools. Anyway, I always hit Mano. I says, Mano, if you ever get on a refereeing, I got an opening at Fox 40. You could be the manager of the P sucker division. What we do is we suck the P's out of P whistles, and you're qualified to be the manager of the P sucking division. And he never answered me. I want to tell you, I don't want to forget to tell you this story about the Olympics. Dean Smith, class. Back in those days, they didn't have Betamax or films. Like, you never saw yourself working the game. I never saw the film, the ABC film of the 1976 gold medal game. 10 years later, I opened my mail at the office. It's a letter from Dean Smith on North Carolina blue ink. Dear Ron, attached is the tape of the 1976 Olympic gold medal game that you officiated. Now, the part that I want to make there, he didn't say that I coached and won a gold medal. He said the 76 Olympic game that you officiated. I got the letter here in my drawer to this day. It was dated in 1986 because I had refereed Michael Jordan's first game in 1981. And I remember going up to Coach Smith and I said, Coach Smith, that boy, Mike from Wilmington, he's pretty good. And Coach Smith turned and he said, he's not bad. Not bad.
Yeah, he was all right.
Yeah. Anyway, everywhere I went, including the Olympics, Adrian Dantley in the Olympics got elbowed in the nose. And I was in the trail position. Coach Smith is sitting there. John Thompson is standing there. And I blew my whistle with the P and it got stuck. So Adrian Dantley is under the basket, blood all over the place. And I remember 10 years later seeing the tape where Jim McKay from ABC said his exact words, well, the Canadian referee has a lot of problems out here. There's blood all over the place, and we can't hear his whistle. And that was true. My whistle got stuck. And when I went into the NCAA, everywhere I worked, Duke, North Carolina, UCLA, the Houston Astrodome, the whistle would get stuck. And then, I believe it was 1984, I worked the pre-Olympics in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And, the difference between an angry crowd in Brazil and the angry crowd, disappointed crowd in Montreal, they shoot referees in Brazil. And my whistle got stuck in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And there was a riot, and I was on the floor, and I said, if I live, I'm going to make a P-less whistle. And Brazil won the game. And I got to the airport as fast as I could, came to Canada, and I said to my wife, Marie, and we had just bought Fluke Transport, had zero money, none. I was refereeing basketball to buy groceries. And I said, Marie, I'm going to invent a P-less whistle, but I got to borrow $150,000. And she said, you're hat. So next day, I went to the bank and I said, bank, I want $150,000 to design a P-less whistle. And he was the bank that I used to finance my trucks. And he said, Ron, I got a suggestion. There's a mental hospital up there. I think you need to go and take medication. So now I didn't have any money. The trucking company was brand new. Marie was running the trucking company. I was refereeing, carrying American dimes in my pocket because the payphones in the States wouldn't take Canadian dimes. And I was the only referee in the NCAA that crossed the border every game. And so finally, I found an engineer. And I said, Chuck, will you help me design this peelless whistle? And he said, with all due respects, nobody in the world is ever going to buy a peelless whistle. So I'm going out of his lab to my car. He said, just a minute. You're that guy that puts, if it's on time, it's a fluke on the back of your trucks. I said, yeah, that's me. He said, well, we may not be successful, but we're going to have a lot of fun because you sound to me like you're crazy. Chuck and I spent 3.5 years. I said, Chuck, it's got to hold like a whistle. It's got to look like a whistle. It's got to feel like a whistle. My first prototype, was 14 inches long. We could get the sound, but we couldn't get the shape and the size. So we hired an assistant. He was an engineer. We hired a scientist. We hired a PhD in sound from Syracuse University. They all gave me credit because I had, if it's on time, it's a fluke on the back of my truck. So they thought I was smart. And then we hired a music teacher, my mom, who was a music teacher. So finally, the last 2 years, I was with Chuck every day for an hour. And we got it. And we had 2 prototypes. And I owed $150,000. And Marie said, you have 2 whistles worth $75,000 each. You are really stupid. So I took 2 months off the trucking company, went across Canada to sell this. It's ultrasonic, it's peelless, it's pretty, it's black, it's wonderful. Came back, never sold one. Too black, too white, too loud, too soft, too negative. Then the phone rang, FIBA, and said, would you work the Pan American Games in Indianapolis? So I didn't have any money. I couldn't fly. I drove. It's 8 hours, Dana, to your house in Indianapolis.
Good to know.
Burlington, Ontario. I drove down, and I think the dormitory was in Butler.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It was in August. Hot, humid as crazy in Indianapolis. So I book into the dormitory with my 2 whistles. Put them under my pillow because they're $75,000 each. All these refs are living in this dormitory, and I'm sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the birds are chirping, and it's really, really quiet. And I go upstairs with my 2 prototypes and blow it. All these referees came running, and they said, holy cow, what is it? I said, it's a Fox 40. Can we buy it? Nope.
That'll be $75,000.
It'll be a $75,000 whistle.
And have a mold. And I said, they're on back order. I went out, I think it was Butler University, on the picnic table that week, got 20,000 orders at $6 US, $8 Canadian, $160,000. Got in the car, drove back to Burlington, went to my mold maker and said, well, you've really created a mess here. we got 20,000 orders and no mold. So you better make a mold. And he made a single cavity mold for $15,000. Now our molds are 30 cavity, and we do 20,000 whistles a day in 140 countries, and all made in North America, in Canada, or in the United States. They're not offshore. They're all made in North America. We now have about 200 products with the Fox 40 brand, and Dana has one, Nate has one,
I've got a few right behind me.
and the Queen has one.
Because why wouldn't she?
The Queen have one.
I do have. Do you still have the original prototype?
I do.
Do you have that thing? Do you have that thing cased? And
Yeah, I got a 14-inch prototype. I got some of we had about 14 or 15. I got them all. I got the first whistle that ever came off the mold. The first whistle that came off the mold was November 5th, 1987, and which is my birthday, November the 5th.
Oh my gosh. What a great birthday present.
Yeah. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, everybody, the National Federation, I think they made it mandatory. Everybody wanted it. And I remember the NBA, that was a really funny phone call. They called and they said, send us a couple of those silly whistles that you make. It was actually Daryl Gerritsen. And I sent him. He used them. And he says, they're quite silly. I'm going to use one tomorrow night. So he used it tomorrow night. And he called. And he said, well, it's different. And the third night, he said, I worked in the Chicago Stadium. And congratulations. The whistle is now mandatory in the NBA.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just exploded. Now, Chuck, my engineer, said, you got to dedicate your life. We've invented the best whistle in the world, and you got to dedicate your life to making it better. And that was 30 years ago. And every year we've got 12 models. We change the colors. We do an improvement. Every single year we do a technology improvement because I made a pledge to Chuck, the engineer, that I would dedicate my life. And now it's not me, all my people in the company. I'm the least important person in this company. I surrounded myself with brilliant people, and now they, every year, make a technology change. Plus, the Fox 40 Marine Division saves lives. And the Fox 40 Marine Division is bigger than the Fox 40 Division because I surrounded myself with teammates, my kids. Steve works for the Buffalo Bills on the chain crew. Dave has refereed 7 Grey Cups, our Super Bowl. Ronnie, who you know, Dana.
I do.
Referees. Zero handicap golfer. Got us into Michael Jordan's golf course. So, it's easy when you have mentors and teammates and 2 ears and 1 mouth used proportionately.
One of my favorite expressions. I love that one.
Yeah, right.
Ron, through all of that, was there ever a point where you just wanted to just change your course and get rid of the whistle and just go back to just trucking? And how did you kind of talk yourself, using, that determination that you have to continue on?
That is the most amazing question. It's a 2-part answer. Number one, halfway through my NCAA career, I worked a game in Western Kentucky that went into triple overtime. And back in those days, ESPN had a Saturday night 8 o'clock game. Now they have a game every hour on the hour on ESPN 24, ESPN 20. Back then, it was the Saturday night national TV game at 8 o'clock. And I had it. Went into triple overtime, and I missed a goaltending at the final buzzer in triple overtime. And we're talking 30 years ago. To this day, I, once a month, wake up having a dream about making that incorrect call. And I remember driving back from Bowling Green, Kentucky, and calling my supervisor, Charlie Bloodworth, and telling him I'm quitting. I just cost somebody the game. And Charlie said to me, that's not determination, that's quitting. And he said, remember, Ron, there has to be pain to have gain. Got back to my hotel in Nashville, which is an hour and 15 minutes, and decided I had the determination. But to this day, that bothers me. I cost that team the game. So, with the whistle, we're 3.5 years into the design. It's Canadian Thanksgiving in October. And we got the sound, but I can't get it to come out the mold without sinkholes. And I call all these engineers in Detroit to try and figure it out. It's 3.5 years. I owe $150,000. We couldn't get the sound. Then we got the sound. Then we couldn't get the manufacturing. And I remember Canadian Thanksgiving, the holiday is on a Monday. And on the Friday, I'm with the mold maker. And I said, this isn't worth it. I said, my trucking company's brand new. We need the money. My wife's really angry. All my friends ignored me. They didn't admit they knew who I was. They said, well, Dad's gone a little bit crazy. He's trying to invent a keyless whistle. And they wouldn't talk to me. So that Friday, I quit. And on Thanksgiving Monday, my mentor called me. And I had told him I was quitting. And he said, Ron, you're my friend. But I don't have friends that are quitters. So you go back and you show some determination and figure it out. And I went back to the mold maker and became very frustrated. And I was calling the engineers, and I threw the phone down on the cradle. And I turned to my mold maker and I said, that phone didn't break. What kind of plastic do they use to make a phone? He says it's ABS plastic. I said, get a bag. The whistle came out perfect. Absolutely perfect. 5 days earlier, I quit. But my mentor, I don't have friends that are quitters. So we're no longer friends if you're a quitter. There it is. It's still there in 12 colors, 12 models.
I have goosebumps right now. Like that, I had no idea with the phone plastic. That's an incredible story. I've known you for a long time, and I don't think I ever heard that story. That's amazing. Just what perseverance to be done with it and over it, and just I'm gonna go deal with my trucking company, and
Yep.
maybe my wife will stop being mad at me, and I'm done with this whole whistle thing. And then a frustration and slamming the phone down put that light bulb on, and it's just that's
Dana, Marie's got over it. She now teaches spending at the mall. She gets checks. Call her ka-ching.
I think she's earned that.
Yeah, she teaches spending at the malls. Yeah.
I feel like I should hang out with Marie, but that's just I'm just saying.
Yeah. She's kind of over it. The kids talk to me now, which is pleasant.
It's good, you know.
Yeah, right. It kind of did a 360 in direct proportion to the success, but they do a great job. Ronnie and Dave run Fox 40. Dave runs Floke. They're great. Bree keeps me in line. Only boss I've ever had. And she's great. Yeah, she had to run the trucking company because I was 25 years on an airplane in the United States, crossing the border every single day. It was tough, but she was there. And, I got to call in about 6 times a day using American dimes.
It was tough, but Marie was tougher. So that's
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
I mean, this is unrelated. I mean, it's related to officiating, but it's amazing how many loved ones support our dreams when it comes to officiating, because without our loved ones, none of this is possible. Fox 40 is not possible. Your career as an official is not possible. And so maybe tell us kind of, her process and her thought process of supporting you.
I'm going to suggest Dana's on the board of NASO. And you know what we need? We need a gold whistle award for a spouse.
Oh, I love that idea.
I would like you. I can't be there tomorrow because, I'm not feeling well. But I really think without family support, you have zero chance to make it as a referee. You gotta have family support. And my son Dave gave a speech at the last summit we had in Atlanta, and it put Bob Delaney to his knees because my son Dave explained that he missed his son's birthday. He missed his son's graduation. He's missed his son's this. He missed his son's that. And his son came to him one day and said, yeah, do you remember my university graduation? And his son, my grandson, said, no, Dad, you don't remember it. You weren't there. You were officiating. Bob Delaney called me the minute on my cell. The minute that speech, he said, can I have Dave's cell number? That made an impact on me in a really big way. He phoned Dave, he emailed Dave, he texted Dave, and he said, Dave, that put me down. He said, that's what we're all thinking. Because, you miss birthdays, you miss anniversaries, you miss bar mitzvah, you miss graduation, you miss everything. And, NASO needs an award for a family member to represent the sacrifice that an official's family withstands. Because to be an official, what did my mentor say? You have to work 100 games. And when you're not working 100 games, you go and watch good refs work 100 games and keep your stuff in the trunk. And there's a big sacrifice. I mean, you have to love the game. Let's face it, referees referee for money. It helps. It helped me. It bought me a Harvey's hamburger. Otherwise, I can't have a Harvey's hamburger. So there needs to be an award, Dana.
Ron, this is brilliant. And in all the discussions that Dana and I had in our offices, It was always talking about how we could advocate and recognize officials. And not once, I don't think once did we ever think to recognize significant others, family members, children. And this is why we're doing this podcast, because we want to talk about ideas and
Exactly.
spark something, and not just NASO, but every state association and every organization that deals with officiating should find ways to recognize those loved ones. Man,
And I think that's
brilliant.
such a great point. One of the things I've been really conscientious about doing is when I speak to officials, I always talk about their families, because I understand that sacrifice. Like I know how often officials are away from home, so it's so important that when I have the opportunity to have a microphone somewhere, that I make sure I thank the spouses and families, the partners, whomever, employers who are letting people off of work, because there's so much of a support system behind officials to be able to be successful, because you can't do this alone. You have to have mentors, but you have to have that team at home who's gonna, if you have a spouse who's holding it down for you while you're out officiating,
Right.
it's just there's such unsung heroes really in officiating. And Ron knows, one of the things I do every month, and Nate knows this, is go up to Skokie, Illinois to have brunch with Jerry Mark Bryant and Bobby, his wife.
Right.
And being able to hear her stories about the basement flooding while he's 200 miles away officiating a game, and having kids and having to deal with that. It's just, they are the unsung heroes of officiating. I love the idea of finding a way to advocate for them. And I used to tell officials back in New Mexico, I'm like, make sure you use one of your checks or several of your checks to do something nice for your spouse. Take her to dinner, to save your checks up and go on vacation, or go, whatever it is, buy them something nice, because you don't get to do that if you don't have somebody who's backing you. Like it's just facts.
There's no question. My great time now is playing golf with my wife and my 3 kids, because basically they were neglected. They were completely neglected. And when you think of it, without their support, there's no career.
Right?
There's
None
no
of it.
officiating career. There needs to be an award, as Nate said, for significant other, for family members, just to be recognized. And maybe NASO, they're the leaders in the sport. They're our spokesperson for the industry. And who better than NASO to originate an award such as that?
I love that. I'll make sure we talk about that at the board meeting in the next couple of days.
Please, Dana.
I will.
That would be
I'm
great.
your proxy, so I got your background.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we've talked about on our podcast, the goal of our From A to Zebra is really to elevate, educate, and excite current officials, prospective officials, that average sports fan that really doesn't know anything about officiating, but maybe they think they do from their couch. You're really a person who embodies those traits of elevating, educating, and exciting. You've served on the NASO board of directors as the special advisor for over 3 decades, I think. 31, that's amazing. So is it just your determination that keeps your passion and enthusiasm for officiating fresh, or is there something more than that?
It is. You know what it is? People say to me, what's the best game you ever refereed, and all this sort of stuff. I don't have one. It's the people I've met. That is my motivation. And you just named one of them is you, Dana. I really honor you. I respect you. You are a pistol. And
Absolutely.
Also, like, for example, Jerry Markbright came here. If I wasn't an official, I wouldn't get to know Jerry Markbright. I wouldn't get to know all these people. Steve Javi, Joey Crawford, all these people. It's not about the game. It's not about the excitement. That's easy. It's about the people you meet. And I'm blessed. Every day, I've been a charter member of NASO and a charter subscriber to Referee Magazine, even though Dave Dodge did the article on Hank Nichols
And not you.
and not me.
Rude.
And it's all about I met Barry Mano. I refereed with Barry Mano. I watched Bill Topp become an employee of Referee Magazine. These are the best and brightest people, not just in officiating, in the world. And we sit in that boardroom, and we're sitting with wonderful people that have refereed NBA championships, Major League Baseball, Super Bowls. Never about the assignment. It's about the people. It's about the people. And that's my motivation to keep Fox 40 and my family supporting the industry of officiating, because when I got into it, it wasn't an industry, it was a hobby. Now it's an industry. And we have a privilege to be able to support the officiating industry and the people involved and the families that support the people that are involved.
I love that answer. Nate and I talk a lot about our why, and our why is always the people. Has nothing to do with the game. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's all about those friendships. I mentioned it before we got on air. Nate is one of my very best friends. If it weren't for officiating, I would know him. And that makes me sad. Like, how would I even have functioned? How would Nate, somebody that when I was feeling kind of beat up in my previous position, he rejuvenated my career. He made me think outside the box and really breathe life into me when I needed it as a career person. And I just think about those friendships and the people that have your back through everything, and they know everything about you, and they love that. They love your flaws just as much as they love the good things about you. And that is such a great answer. I was just sitting here going, yep, same.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's exactly it.
And if you weren't in officiating, think of it. You wouldn't know Nate. That's sad.
It's so sad.
It's so sad.
It's great. You're in officiating.
So my husband he is our producer of this show, and I give him all the credit for coming up with this idea. But Ed was an athletic coordinator for Albuquerque Public Schools in Albuquerque, and I was working at the New Mexico Activities Association, and we met at a football officials meeting at the lecture hall at Sandia High School in Albuquerque. At the time, we were both in other situations and other relationships, and we met each other. We developed this amazing friendship, and then when our lives changed, all roads led back to us being together. But now we've been together almost 11 years, and had it not been for officiating, I wouldn't know my husband, which is just devastating. Like, he
is a great example right there. That's what officiating is all about. The people. And
speaking of people, I've heard you've had an encounter with the Queen of England. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Well, I'm the honorary colonel of the highest profile regiment in Canada. It's an appointment made by the Prime Minister. And one of our soldiers was ceremoniously guarding the War Memorial Monument in Ottawa and got assassinated. My boss was Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. I was the honorary colonel. She's the colonel-in-chief. She was the colonel-in-chief. So, being the honorary colonel, I'm responsible for our soldier's family, his mother, his 4-year-old son, his 2 sisters. So we arranged the biggest military funeral in the history of our country to bury Corporal Nathan Cirillo. The day after, my boss emailed me. Imagine, an email from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. And it said, "Colonel, would you check your calendar? I really want to express condolences on the passing of Corporal Cirillo to you personally." So I checked my calendar. In the meantime, I got 2 more emails from the Queen and 2 letters. And can you imagine going home and saying to your wife, "Marie, We're going to see the Queen in her apartment. So I emailed her back and said, May the 9th, 2015, we'll be there. Put the tea on. So we went to England, checked into the Goring Hotel next door to the Buckingham Palace. Her apartment is in the back of Buckingham Palace. And so I got in and I said, listen, this is Saturday. I'm going to see the Queen on Tuesday. I need my kilt ironed. There's only one person allowed to iron your kilt. So he came into work on Monday, took my kilt out of my closet in my room, ironed it, put it back in my closet, and I got all ready for the Queen. But on the Saturday night, the chief of staff came and gave us a 2-hour lecture on the do's and don'ts when you see the Queen. And the last thing he said, don't touch the Queen. So Tuesday comes, but there's a little protocol. Before you see the Queen, you go in Buckingham Palace and you meet the 6 ladies in waiting. Every one of them gives you a little tip. And they teach Marie how to curtsy. And my curtsy is a bow. So each ladies in waiting, there were 6 of them, finished by saying, don't touch the Queen. The time's up. The appointment is at 12:10. It's to be for 10 minutes. When the Queen says 12:10, Vince Lombardi time is 12:08. So I walk in, Marie's behind me. She curtsies proper, and then the Queen held out her hand to shake. 3 seconds seemed like 3 hours. What the heck do? I shook the Queen's hand. And she smiled and said, it's okay. So the 2 corgi dogs are sitting beside her, and it's hard not to look around because there's all the pictures. Charlotte, the baby, who's now, 10 years old, was sleeping, and there's pictures, and there's a grand piano, and she knew everything about Corporal Cirillo. She said, how is Marcus? How's Catherine, his mother? She named his 2 sisters. She was the boss. And she said, I am so proud to be the colonel-in-chief of your regiment. And now it's 20 minutes. Would you like to see my garden? Yeah. So we go over, and she opens the drapes, and it's unbelievable, the lawn. And Marie said, wow, that's beautiful. She said, yeah, I got a little party tomorrow. And Marie said, really? How many people? 8,000. He said, Your Majesty, you've done a wonderful job cutting your lawn. And she said, Colonel, that's my John Deere over there. I cut that little square for these 2 little darling dogs, 2 little corgis. And she said, Colonel, did you bring those Canada geese to poop on my lawn? I said, Your Majesty, I have the solution. You're going to love me. Fox 40. And she put it in her mouth and she said, Colonel, this is better than a shotgun. And she blew it. And then she turned to Marie and said, where are you staying? And we're 50 minutes into this 10-minute audience. Marie said, we're at the Goring. And Her Majesty said, that's a la-ti-da place. I'll see you tonight. And she came over. I was in the lobby of the Goring. She drove up with one chauffeur, one security guard in her green Bentley. And I'm standing with the owner of the Goring Hotel, who looks like the left tackle for the Green Bay Packers. He's about 300 pounds. And she walked in and she said to the owner, Big Dave, I was with a Canadian today, and there he is. And what amazed me, she came, and there's like 25 photographers, but only one security guard, one chauffeur, and a green Bentley. And she walks in and meets the owner of the Goring Hotel and calls him Big Dave. And so my wife and her had a little glass of wine, and then she went into the room where she had a gathering of people and did what she had to do, and we left. But it was neat. Imagine getting 2 letters from the Queen, which I have laminated, and a whole bunch of emails from the Queen, which I did print. Yep. And then going home to your wife and saying, Marie, we're going to Buckingham Palace to meet with the Queen. And we...
You know, I've been some cool places, but I've never once received an email or a letter from the Queen, and you are the only person I know who has ever met the Queen. I think it's an appropriate time to kind of just close this podcast out, because we're going to have some great guests, but none of them are going to have that story at all, or any of your stories, really. So
I don't think so.
I know not. But Ron, I just want to say thank you so much, Ron Foxcroft, for joining us, for making us an international endeavor. I feel like we're pretty la-ti-da now ourselves, and really for changing officiating as we know it, because of your invention of the Fox 40 keyless whistle. They are a one-of-a-kind original, and so are you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I love you, Nate. Great
love you too.
And
nice
Ed,
to meet you.
in the background there, I know he did a wonderful job, and I look forward to cutting some bread with him down in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the NASO Summit next year. I'll see you there, Ed. My pleasure.
Thank you, Ron.
See you, Dana. You're my proxy tomorrow.
I got your back, buddy.
Okay.
All right. Next week, join us for episode 5, letter E, where we will be talking about ethics with Barry Mano, founder and CEO of Referee Enterprises. Check us out on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and X to find episode recaps and previews of upcoming episodes. Thanks for joining us.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook, From A to Zebra Podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.